I'll tell you what I like to do. I'd like to go through a piece of Reb Yaakov, which actually Reb Yaakov mentioned this to Rav Soloveitchik in 1937. And I'll show you where I found this out, really. My father told me about it. But I want to begin with a Mishnah because you need some background, okay? And the Mishnah is in the last Mishnah in Sechet Nazir, a very famous Mishnah, and that's page 1. Nazir Haya Shmuel. Oh, you know what? Let's actually before that, let's get a Navi, if you have a Navi, and beginning of chapter Tes Zayin. After, in other words, Shaul, really messes up with Amalek, and of course Shmuel tells him, basically, God ripped away the kingdom from you. So, in beginning of Tet Zayin, God sends Shmuel on a mission to be Moshe, a new king. So it says like this, beginning of Tet Zayin. Vayomer Hashem el Shmuel ad masaya to misabel el Shaul. How long can you mourn for a guy? Vani mastiv mimloch al Yisrael. I rejected him. Malay karnecha shemen v'lech eshlachacha el Yishai beis halachmi ki raisi bevanav limela. Okay, go fill up your Karen, what is it called in English?
Horn.
Your horn, right? With oil, and go. I am sending you to Yishai beis halachmi, right? And from Beis Lechem, because I saw amongst his children for me a king. Vayomer Shmuel, Echelech v'shama Shaul ve'argoni. How can I go? Shaul will hear about this, and he'll kill me. Vayomer Hashem, Eglat bakar tikach biyadecha, v'amarta lizboach l'Hashem bati. And God said, take a Eglat bakar, a young calf, and in your hand, and say, L'zboach Hashem, make an announcement. I'm going around. Shmuel had a tendency of going around. I'm going L'zboach Hashem bati. In other words, when he comes to, right, sounds like a lie. It sounds like a lie. That's a good point. But Mipnei Hashalom, maybe you're allowed. You have to see, right? But but some people actually learn that he did actually do the sacrifice, so maybe it was only half a lie, right? But there is a chazal that makes it look like that it is actually a lie. You're correct. Okay, but in any event,
what
okay.
What was the exact problem in terms of only if he would hear that he went specifically to anoint David would it be a problem? Because
to anoint anybody, right? Baruch, it would be a problem, right? He says to God, and this is the important pasuk, right? Ech elech v'shama Shaul v'argoni. How could I go, right? And this is a very strange comment when God sends you somewhere. I can't go because Shaul's going to kill me. Okay? So what's your problem, Baruch?
No, it's just how is helping, to take a sacrifice going to help him to get away from this? If it's the fact that he's specifically going to anoint somebody else.
Well, that's exactly the point. That's why Michael pointed out there's a little bit of a lie here. He says, Shmuel had a tendency to go around and bring sacrifices and give a mussar shmuas, right? He used to do that. So he's going to Beis Lechem, and he's gonna be mechazik Beis Lechem a little bit by bringing a korban, and they're gonna have a sudah and everything, which of course doesn't in the text never really happens. Okay, but some people say that it did eventually sacrifice. He came with this sheep or something, or not a sheep. He came with a cow, and he sacrificed. Okay, but let's take a look at the strange thing Reb Yaakov deals with is that Shmuel is saying to God, "How can I go?" God should basically say to Shmuel, "Oh, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of your problem, right? You don't leave it to me, right?" That's what Reb Yaakov is talking about. But let's begin by talking about this whole issue about Shmuel not wanting to go. By the way, I'll tell you something. I saw it many, many years ago, but I'll tell you something, a very interesting shot in this whole thing. But it says like this in the Mishnah in Nazir. Nazir haya Shmuel kedivrei Rav Noroi. Shmuel was a Nazir like the words of Rav Noroi, shenemar umoru lo yala al rosho. Because it says by Shmuel that when he is born, right, one shouldn't have a moreh. A moreh should not go up on his head. So the question is, what does the word moreh mean? So it says nemar b'shimshon moreh, right? V'nemar b'shmuel moreh. Ma moreh ha'amura b'shimshon nazir. That we know that it means a tar. It means a what do you call it? A razor blade, right? Af mora amura b'shmuel nazir. Okay. And I think I have here the what do you call it edition, right? I photocopied from the Schottenstein edition, right? Because over there by Shmuel it says ki nach at the bottom right nach haravi aladet bo bain umaru loyal rosho ki nazir lukim b'yanar. Oh, now that's by Shimshon. That's by Shimshon. What does it say by Shmuel vatid? Oh. Vatida neder. That's right above that. Vatomer, right? Imro tireh. Boni amosechos kartani, right? Unatativ Hashem kol yimei chayav u'moru lo yal al rosho. Right. So by Shimshon it's clearly a nazir. It says it. By Shmuel it doesn't say nazir, but the Gemara gives us gzeira shava, so to speak. Tar over. Moreh means tar by Shimshon, so it means tar over here. And that's why it says, Rav Noroi said, right, that Nazir haya Shmuel. Shmuel was a Nazir. Okay. Omar Reb Yossi. Reb Yossi said the following thing. Valo ein mora ela shel basav adam. The word mora means only a basav adam, being afraid of a human being. Right? That's what it means. Moral Yala Rosho, Chana was saying, he won't be afraid of anybody. Okay? Amalei Reb Naroi said back to him, Halo kfar nemar vayom Shmuel eich elech v'shom hashol v'argani. Right? How could you say this, right? It already says that Shmuel says to God, how can I go, Shol here, and kill me? So you see, he was afraid. So when Chana says, Mora loyal al rosho, it can't mean he's not going to be afraid. Because in the text it says, he says to God, how can I go? Shol's going to kill me. That means Shmuel's afraid. That's the way the Mishnah ends. And therefore, it sounds like very much that Rav Noroi is correct, that it means a Nazir, because it can't mean not to be fearful, right? Because we already see the text that we just read that Shmuel was afraid. Okay? So the Rambam, if you look at the next page, the Rambam in Shmona Prakim, right? He goes through all the good midos that a Navi needs. And he says he doesn't need all good midos. He can have some problematic midos, not too many, but he got problematic midos. So if you look where I underlined on page 2 here by the Rambam, it's not a condition he needs all the good character traits. That he doesn't need any sort of what's it called? Vice, any vices. Shorei Shlomo Navi, okay, this right? Shlomo was a Navi, like you have a pasuk, and we know that he had problem. Rov HaTaiva, he says. He goes through many Nevi'im that had all these issues. Then he goes down. Shmuel pachad mishol. V'Yaakov nisyor me pegishut Esav. Ve'elamiz yotzabehem hey mechitzos hanevi'im aleim hashal. These are, Shmuel had a midah of being fear, and Yaakov had a midah of being afraid of Esav. Shmuel was afraid of Shaul, right? You see very clearly the Rambam is understanding that these were negative traits. When he asked God, How could I go? Shaul will kill me. That was something negative. Okay. Now let's take a look at Reb Yaakov. Okay. So now Reb Yaakov says like this. Tumua. Right? You see, Vayomer Shmuel, Tumua. Shmuel maharher acharei tzivuya shel makom. Shmuel thinks about, what God said to him, like he has critique on God. How do you want me to go? Right? Shaul kill me. Right? Moshe never says, how am I going to go to Paro? He's going to kill me. Moshe says, who am I to stand before Paro? But he doesn't say Paro's going to kill me. O Yirmiyahu Navi, Yishal Ech Estaken Linabe Liyoshve Yerushalayim. How could they going to kill me? Right? So he says we don't find such a thing. By the way, by Yirmiyahu, we do find it, the first chapter, that God says to Yirmiyahu, don't be afraid, because I'll be with you. So it seems that Yirmiyahu was afraid. But don't forget, here we're talking about Shmuel HaNavi, that's been a Navi for years. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu just was becoming the leader. Yirmiyahu was becoming the Navi. Here, Shmuel is like Navi for years and years. And all of a sudden, he's afraid of Shaul. It's very interesting, right? I do want to tell you, Agav, if I'm not mistaken, there's a very famous sefer called Ma Ben Shaul L'Dav, Ma Ben David L'Shaul. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It used to be very popular. The fellow who wrote it, right? Bachrach wrote it, exactly. He used to teach in Mechlala. He was a professor, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, he says that it was just an excuse. He didn't want to go and be Moshe anybody instead of Shaul. He wanted to keep Shaul. As soon as God takes away the malchus from Shaul, so to speak, it says right before, in the chapter right before this, it says like this. After Vayelach Shmuel Ramasa v'Shol Olal Beisol Givat Shaul v'lo Yasaf Shmuel eroded Shaul ad Yomoso ki Yisabel Shmuel el Shaul. God Shmuel was mourning Shaul. V'Hashem nicham ki imlichet Shaul al Yisrael. So he wants to claim that Shmuel did not he wanted Shaul to get another chance, and therefore he made an excuse. I can't go. Shaul will kill me. Right? But he really didn't mean that he was afraid. That's the way he learns. Okay? Reb Yaakov has a different approach to this whole thing. We'll see. And the Radak has also a little bit of a different approach. I'll try to see that as well. So what does it say? So he says, Ayin Radak Mashadon Bazeh. Take a look at the Radak, what he says about it. We'll take a look later at the Radak. Od Kasha. The Mishnah Achrona Shel Masechet Nazir, Pligi Rev Noroi Reb Yossi Beferish HaPasuk Le'el Yud Aleph, right? Umora Lo Yat in Shmuel Aleph, right? Pasuk Yud Aleph, Shmuel Aleph, Kapitel Aleph, Mora Le'al Rosho, Shreb Noroi Sova the Hainu Naziris, the Mora Umorat Hainu Tar, a blade. Ve'ilu Reb Yossi Cholakala, Zel Shonam Mishnah, Reb Yossi, v'lo ein mora ela basu v'dam, shel basu v'dam. Omer of Naroi, v'alo kvar nema v'yom b'Shmuel, eichei lech v'shama shol v'argoni. Shekvar hoya lov mora shel basu v'dam ayin sham. Nimtze sher Naroi chiach et a maise kan she'omer Shmuel, right? Eichei lech v'shama shol v'argoni. Shechei mora basu v'dam alal Shmuel. Shmuel was actually afraid. That's what he was trying to prove, Rev Neroi. Right? L'chori has a good taina to Reb Yossi. What would Reb Yossi be mitaretz? Now, this is a very interesting question, because one could learn this Mishnah as checkmate, right? In other words, Rev Neroi said to him, what are you talking about? It's the word not morad. You probably forgot the pasuk that Shmuel was afraid, right? So Reb Yaakov asks us a question: what would Reb Yossi say about that? And the answer could have been, right? He wouldn't say anything. He just like checkmate, and he had to concede, right? Reb Yaakov doesn't learn like that. Now, I want to explain this issue a little bit. When Rashi says something and Tosfos or the Ramban asks a question on Rashi, right? Mm-hmm. The Rosh Yeshiva comes into the shir and answers up Rashi, correct? That's the trick, right? We go answer up Rashi, the Ramban's question on Rashi, or Tosfos' question on Rashi. But that's different. You know why? Because the Ramban and Tosfos lived, 70, 80 years, 100 years after Rashi. So we don't know what Rashi would have said, okay? We don't know what Rashi would have said. So we have a right to say Rashi would have said X, Y, or Z, right? That's what all the Rosh Yeshivas do. They give their shiurim on those good questions or let's say the Reb Kiveger asks on a Ramban or a Rambam. We answer the Rambam and Ramban because Reb Kiveger lived literally 300-400 years after them, right? So we have to help them out. But in the Mishnah, it sounds like they're talking to each other because in the Mishnah it says, go back to that Mishnah for a second. In the Mishnah it says, Omar Reb Neroi said to him, it doesn't say Omar Reb Neroi, Omar le Reb Neroi, right? So even though it says Omar Reb Yossi before, but it sounds like Omar le Reb Neroi, he's talking to someone, they're having a discussion about it, right? And they lived at the same time, l'chora, Reb Yossi and Reb Neroi, right? So here, it's very interesting that Reb Yaakov feels he has to answer up Reb Yossi, right? And you cannot assume that Reb Yossi didn't have an answer, that it was checkmate, and he forgot about this puzzle. Because it isn't fair to Reb Yossi to say he forgot about this puzzle, right? But Reb Yossi himself never answers Reb Neroi. Shouldn't he answer back Reb Neroi? Now Reb Yaakov's going to give an answer, and of course we could say, "Oh, why didn't Reb Yossi say this to Reb Neroi?" Right? In other words, the Mishnah ends with Reb Neroi Yodo al Yonah, right? That's where the Mishnah ends. And by the way, we read the Rambam, who takes for a davar pashut that Shmuel was, when it says over here that Shmuel said, "How can I go?" He was afraid. He paskins basically in his Shmona Prakim like Reb Neroi, right? So let's see what Reb Yaakov says over here. V'nira shebe'em Shmuel lo haya alav mora basav v'dam. He says Shmuel wasn't afraid of a human being. It says Reb Neroi showed from the pasuk he was. Ela kavana Shmuel b'sheila so eichelech v'sham ashol v'goma haisa imlim shoach b'pirsum o b'atznea. His question was not how could I go? Shaul's going to kill me. How can I go? Meaning, not that I'm afraid. Which way should I be moshechim? Should I be moshechim like eichelech? Should I go with a band, like a 4-piece band, right, and announce that David is the king? Or should I go b'atznei alechet and not let anyone know? Kolomar, ha'im yimashach b'pirsum, im yimashach b'pirsum, right? Ki kvar tama malchuso shel Shaul, because he already lost his malchus. Once he loses his malchus, then I'll go b'pirsum, right? U'mela, right? Tama, in other words, kikvar tama malchuso shel Shaul. U'mela ein kamarida b'malchus v'maisa mashichas David. There's no morid b'malchus if he's not a king anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So I could now be Moshech David without any problem, correct? O Dilma adayin lo tama malchuso shel Shaul u'maisa mashichas David u'be'etzem maisa shel marida b'malchus, right? If Shaul is still king, as long as he's alive, so when you Moshech David, you're morid b'malchus. So then Shmuel is saying, how should I go? Because if he's not a melech, I don't have a problem. But if he is a melech, I'm a moed b'malchus. So I can't do it b'pirsim anymore. Right? So Reb Yaakov is saying there's a lumdus here. Okay, that's how Reb Yaakov is answering the question, is that Shmuel is not saying, how can I go? Shaul's going to kill me. Right? He means, how should I do the Mashiach? Right? Because I have a suffix here. Is Shaul still king or not king? In other words, there's no precedent for this. Who was the first king? Shaul. And he lost the kingdom. So we don't know what that means. Does it mean he's not king anymore? And of course, if it means not king anymore, so then David does become king when he's Moshechim. Or no, he's still king till he dies. And then I'll be a Moed b'malchus. So when he says he'll kill me, he doesn't mean he's going to kill me shelo ka'alacha. He'll kill me ka'alacha, right? He'll kill me because I'm a Moed b'malchus. So that's what he wants to know from God. A nice lumdish discussion is he having with God. He's having with God. Okay?
Is there any sense that there's the fact that he's more of a malchus is a malchus of this world, but he's being Mekayim, the tzivui of malchus shamayim. So
Excellent.
when those two things are coming in stira.
No, that's exactly the point. I think you're right. He's saying I'm going to be Moshech David, be Mekayim malchus shamayim, but I have to know how. Do I do it bepirsum or befarhesya? In other words, I do it betzina. Right? His question wasn't, I don't want to go, because that was Reb Yaakov's question. How could Shmuel say to God, how can I go? What do you mean? I'm sending you. That's how you could go. Right?
Ech was not a rhetorical question. It was a mamash logistic question.
Right, exactly. It was a logistic.
Like the Meraglim. Not should I send the Meraglim, but how do I send the Meraglim?
Exactly. That's it, right? Not I should send the Meraglim. How do I send them? Exactly. Okay? So he says, okay, where are we up to? And certainly God's kavanah was that he should do betzina. In order that people should not understand from this that Malchus Shol was over. In other words, if this on this side that that God is saying to him that Shmuel would be Moshech David b'farhesya and wouldn't hide it. In other words, Shmuel was not commanded by God to do it b'farhesya. V'yesh l'shol schut l'hargo v'shchia chazeka. And then if he would do it, since he wasn't commanded on it, right? If he would do it b'farhesya, Shaul would have a right to kill him, right? So Reb Yaakov over here is really raising this issue in a very serious way, right? That meaning if Shaul is still king, of course God would say that he should do it b'tzina, right? In order that Shaul shouldn't have a good reason for killing him. Because b'farhesya, God never commanded him to do it b'farhesya, right? He just told him to go do it. So Shmuel would really be doing it on his own. So Shmuel is saying to God, I can't do it on my own. You got to tell me which way to do it. Ulefizet shuvas HaKadosh Baruch Hu haisa shelo tama malchuso shel Shaul. V'al kein yesh la'astir et Mashiachas David. And therefore, we have to say that God held, right, or was telling Shmuel that Shaul's malchus didn't yet end, and therefore there is la'astir. How do we know God's telling him la'astir? Because he says, Tikach he says the lashon is what? Tikach eglat, right? Eglat bakar, right? So God is basically saying to him, hide it, right? He's saying do it benister, correct? He's doing benister. And that means that God holds that Shaul, right? We see in retrospect, or we see in, right, from the way God told him what to do, right? God's not angry at him. He tells him what to do, that Shaul is still a melech. Okay? Venira, Shachein Mashiach Zu Shemachshach Shmuel et David, Lo Hosa Mashiach Gemura. And therefore, you have to say that even though God told him to be Moshech him as a melech, it was not Mashiach Gemura. Okay? Why does he say that? Because can you have two kings? If it was Mashiach Gemura, you have actually two kings at the same time, which is very strange, right? If Shaul is still the king, and the Mashiach of David was a real Mashiach, now David is the king. So what do you do over here, right? So it says over here, he says, why do I know that it's not a Mashiach Gemura? Shlohaisa one, Shlohaisa Eitzel Mayan. It wasn't by a Mayan. Ki the Kaimelam Baramba Milchus Malachim, Perak Alpha Loch Yadav, Ki Shemoshchen Malchi Beis David, a Moshchen Otam El Ala Mayan, like they did with Shlomo HaMelech, right? So there was no Mayan over here, so it couldn't have been a real Mashiach. Ubeis la'achar she'anshe Yehuda mashchu lemelech. After the Anshe Yehuda, after Shaul died, the Anshe Yehuda were Moshech David as a melech. Lahalan Shmuel Beis Dalid. It says over there that his tribe was Moshech him for a melech Mashiach. Pana David la'anshe Yavesh Gilad she'ikablo so kamelech. He then turns to the people of Yavesh Gilad who had loyalty to Shaul, and he said, "Vata techezakna yedechem v'yu livnei chayil ki meit adonechem Shaul v'gam oti mashchu beit Yehuda l'melech alehem." David comes to the Anshe Yavesh Gilad, and he says, he implies, "I know you're loyal to Shaul. He died already. They're the ones who took him when he was killed by the Philistines. They're the one who took him down and buried him." Anshe Yavesh Gilad. He says, in other words, I know you're loyal to him, but he already died, right? So, and I already got Mashiach for Beis Yehuda, so you guys should accept me as well. Harei shelo hisker shehu kvar nimshach al yidei Shmuel hanavi l'melech al kol Yisrael. Why doesn't he mention to them a much stronger taina? He should say, I just want to let you know a secret. I had Mashiach from Shmuel. I got a good smicha, right? I got Mashiach from Shmuel. He doesn't say that. He says, the Anshe Yehuda were Moshech me. What happened to the Mashiach of Shmuel? That's better than anything. That's the best thing, right? He made me a king of all of Israel. V'rak yiskir Mashiach b'nei Yehuda, right? Mikol zeh muchach shamashicha rishona lo haisa. Now listen what Reb Yaakov writes. Elasiman sharoyu l'malchus. The first Mashiach was a simon that it was royal l'malchus. The hainu sheyihu melech acher gmar malchus Shaul. In other words, Shaul remained king, and therefore David could not be king, because you can't have two kings. Okay? And we're not saying that this Mashiach was a minui l'melech. It was not. It was just a, what would we call it in English? It was a show, right? That David is going to be king. But there was no chalos happening. In other words, it wasn't chal, the malchus on David. It wasn't chal until the Bnei Yehuda were Moshechim. And then the rest of Jewish people were Moshechim, right? But there was no chalos malchus when he was Moshechim. This is an idea of Reb Yaakov.
Right? Reb Shurin, I want to ask two questions.
Yeah.
So if that's true, then when David did become king, there should have been a second Mashiach by a Navi. And we don't see that.
Oh, that's
In
a
other
good
words,
good question. It's a
and
good question.
the second question is like this. So excuse me. Let's go with Rav Yaakov's Perush. So this Mashiach of David, let's call in English, let's call it like a nomination. Like he's not becoming the Melech, but he's like Hashem is
I
showing
like
that
that. A nominated king.
he's not like he's not inaugurated king. He's been nominated. So what is the value of such a nomination if the only person who knows about it is Shmuel and David? If it's Beseser,
So what's the point of it?
yeah, you could say like this. You could say HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to let David know, you should know you are the guy.
The next king.
It's you're the next king, and you have to behave accordingly. But that's it. But is that really? I mean, is that
important?
I mean, is that really necessary? I mean, did David need that? I mean, the whole idea of being Moshe Hamelech Barovam by the Ma'yan, that's to give it like public, certification, to make it, official. And we're doing just the opposite here. We're doing it b'seis and saying, I'm not really making you the Melech. I'm just telling you that you're really to be the Melech in the future. So
I'll tell you, I had your question, and I have a feeling I'm just going to speculate what Reb Yaakov's going to answer because I don't know. But I'll tell you what I mean. I was thinking about like when a new president is nominated, right, in November. Is he become president right away? And there's two presidents? No. You have the president till January, right?
He's the president-elect.
Right, president-elect, right? And he's not the president, right? And he doesn't have any presidential powers, am I correct? And the guy in office who knows he's leaving has presidential powers, correct? So I'm looking at Wayne a little bit like that, meaning Shaul is the king, but you're waiting till January, David. In other words, so do you really need? So my question is like this: the Shailas Halacha is you had a Navi who nominated you, and he did a Mashiach. Okay, now you have other people doing another Mashiach, but they're saying that the Mashiach of Shmuel does count. In other words, you don't need another Navi. He did his part already. Now you could say, I need a Sanhedrin, I need something else, right? I know it's becoming a melech in parts. The chalut
of his malchut cannot begin until Shaul's ends.
Right.
So the act of Mashiach, right.
So that's why I'm saying is that on the one hand, David didn't say that see, Reb Yaakov does have a kasha, which makes Wayne's idea stronger. He says, why didn't David say, as soon as Shaul died, I just want to tell you a big secret, guys, Shmuel was Moshe. Right? He should have said that. I won the election in November. I got good news. right? So what I'm trying to say is that, no, he did get that Mashiach from Shmuel, and he doesn't need it again from a Navi. He got that. But it's not, he doesn't become the king till after. And according to Reb Yaakov, even after, right, he needs the rest of the process. So he had to go to Yehuda and say, give me another Mashiach with the rest of the process.
That's just the Befar Hesia part of it. That's just like that's just like to proclaim to everybody.
He's the king.
But it's not. That's not the real Mashiach. The real Mashiach is done by Shmuel.
That's what I'm thinking. Rabbi Yaakov would say is that Mashiach was done by Shmuel. It was already Yotze. It's like we do things in parts, right? So he Yotze this part, like a ger gets Mila and then Tvila, right? And it's different parts of the Geras. It's different parts. You don't get all in one shot. You could do the Mila on Sunday, and the tefillah you could do a week later. It doesn't have to be like one day.
Similar process by Shmuel.
What?
There's a similar process by Shmuel.
That what?
I mean by Shlomo Melech. Like he got a Mashiach, and he wasn't king immediately.
Who was king? David was still
David.
king. Yeah.
David was still king, but they had to do an emergency Mashiach because of
Adoniyahu. Right. That's also true.
At what point did he actually become king?
Probably when David died, correct?
Yeah, but even though the Mashiach took place earlier.
There it's for sure probably, according to Reb Yaakov, because David was really the king. Here with Shaul, at least by Shaul, we see that Shmuel says God ripped from you the kingdom, right? So you could think that he's not king anymore. But Reb Yaakov is saying no, Shaul remained king till he died. Now, I'm not sure everybody holds this way, but certainly this is the way Reb Yaakov is understanding it, right? And again, Reb Yaakov is doing all this in order to say Shmuel didn't exactly know, since there was no precedent, he didn't exactly know the halacha, right? What status does Shaul have? What status does David have? So that's why he said to God, Eichelech, how should I go? Not rhetorical, but how should I go? Shaul, if I'm doing the wrong thing, Shaul will kill me, right? If he's still the king, he has a right to kill me. Morid b'malchus. So now Reb Yaakov is going to answer up a number of places in the Tanach. What does he answer up? Ulefize move on.
Right, sure. Can I just ask one more question?
Yes.
So when David asks Anshe Yehuda to Nimshochoto, first of all, does he tell them that Shmuel? Does David or Shmuel ever reveal to anybody that there already was a Mashiach?
It's definitely not in the text.
Not in the text.
It's definitely not in the text.
Chazal don't say it either, as far as I know.
No, I don't think they either say it. So Reb Yaakov was just like wondering, like, how could David say Yehuda was Moshe me to these guys and not say Shmuel?
And what does it mean that Yehuda are Moshechim? Since when is a melech nimshach al yedei one shevet? I mean, where's that come from?
There's no precedent for it, so it could be that al pi halacha, every shevet has a right to accept him as the king, or not accept him as the king, So it says over here.
I mean, we all know that David, in his kingship, had lots of political opposition. A simple political opposition could have been very, very Haredi. Who says you're a king? No, you've never been nimshach by a navi. What makes you think you're a king? Sounds very frum to me.
Right. 1 second. Here, wait a minute. Let's see where he says it. Shmuel Beis Dalid. Vayo Anshe Yehuda, Vayimshchu Sham as David Lamelech al Beis Yehuda, Vayagil LeDavid Anshe Yavish Gilad Asher Kavru et Shaul, Vayishlach David Malachim al Anshe Yavish Gilad Vayomer Aleim, and he says this right. V'gam oti mashchu Beis Yehuda Lamelech Alehem, right?
Alehem.
Right, upon them.
On the Shevet.
It's on the Shevet. Take a look in the next chapter. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I have it here.
One thing is for sure, Rav Soloveitchik is going to go. He's going to love this. The Pu'ula is at one time, and the Chalas Din is at a second after time. He's going to go crazy. He's going to love it.
Right. I think there's another place where it does say that this Canim came and will Moshe David on all of Israel. 1 second. I'm almost positive it exists here, that he got another Mashiach on all of Israel. It says like this. In chapter Hay, Pasuk Gimel. 1 second. Oh, Vayavo kol shiftei Yisrael el David Chevrona. David that was a melech in Chevron over Yehuda, right? Vayomer lema hinenu atzmecho b'schocha anachnu. The Jewish, all the Shvatim came, okay?
Parakeh
from the beginning, right? But at one point over there, it says like this.
Tinagid al Yisrael.
Right.
Not Melech.
Vayavo kol ziknei Yisrael el hamelech Chevrona, vayichros lahem hamelech David bris b'Chevron, vayimshechu es David lemelech al Yisrael. The Skenim, which, by the way, the Skenim, that's what the Rambam says. The Rambam says in the Hilchos Malachim beginning that you don't become a king except alidei Navi v'Sanhedrin. So right here, he gets the last final one, right? Vayimshchu es David lemelech al Yisrael. Right? So again, David got a Mashiach on Yehuda, and maybe the Ziknei Yehuda had a right to do that. And then he wanted to get it from also Shaul's side of the family, so to speak. So he went to Yovesh Gilad, right? It doesn't say exactly, if I remember correct, it doesn't say exactly what happened. But eventually the Shvatim come to him and they say to him, we want you as king. He makes a treaty with everybody. And the Israel, So again, Rabbi Yaakov doesn't discuss the Mashiach of Yehuda on David, exactly what that was, but it sounds like he was a melech on Yehuda. That if someone was mored b'malchus, meaning if someone spit in his face, he could kill him, or if he didn't listen to him, he could kill him, right? But not on all of Israel, just on Yehuda. But eventually, it comes on all of Israel. That's what it seems to be over here. And then he says the following thing. He's trying to prove that Shaul was still king. Okay? Because the pashtus is always, when you learn it in high school or in elementary school, it's that Shaul lost his kingdom. That's what God said. God ripped it away from you and gave it. L'recha told me Mecca. Gave it to a friend that's better than you. Right? So Reb Yaakov wants to prove that Shaul was still king. Ulefizem move on. She'amar David la'Avner. David said to Avner later, before, meaning before Shaul died, Avner was still his head of, he was the head of the armies, right? His defense minister. Lo tova davar hazeh asher asita chai Hashem ki b'nei mavis atem asher lo shmartem al odonechem. If you remember, David sneaks up and takes the sword and the water of Shaul, and they're sleeping. And David runs far away and starts screaming at Avner, what did you do? Right? Chai Hashem, you're B'nai Mavis. All the guys guarding him are B'nai Mavis because they were lacking in their guarding the king. Ulchora, Echam David Shu Chayev Misa. Right? How could David have said that they're chayiv misa? It says like b'nei mavet atem. Val korcha shebeheder shmira karoy ala melech ish was emrida b'malchus. If you don't guard the king properly, that's emrida b'malchus. You're not treating the melech properly. Umuchach sheDavid yichas to Shaul din melech. So you see, he gave him a din melech way after David was anointed by Shaul. He gave Shaul din melech. K'mokein tolui b'she'ela zu gam ha'amado shel David. Right? So too, it's dependent in this question whether Shaul lost his malchus. Gam ha'amado shel David. Im kfar tama malchuso shel Shaul yochel liyeh sheyesh kfar leDavid ma'imut shel melech. If Shaul, you're going to say on the side that Shaul lost his malchus, then David does get a malchus. Aval adayin lo tama malchus. So if Shaul's malchus didn't end, im came David od lo etchilat malchusa. Ukamosha amra Avigail shelo yatsa tiv'o ba'olam. Ela shemitchila sava David shegam hu v'gam Shaul shnei malachim. In other words, David originally thought that maybe both are, just like Shmuel didn't know exactly the status. Dol didn't know either. But according to the Gemara, right, Avigail came to David and said, you can't kill Novel because Adayin lo yotza tivacha ba'olam. What does that mean, tivacha ba'olam? It's not clear what that means. Right? Does it mean only there's a lack of pirsum or you're not the king? So he says, David, until Avigail brought this up to him, thought, right? He thought at the beginning that Gam Hu, V'gam Shol Shneim Lachim. But then he realized that's not true. If Shaul is the king, David can't be the king. He can't have two at once. So I just want to show you, if you go to page 7, I think it is, right? So this is a photocopy of my father's sefer. My father has a whole discussion about this, about in other words, is there such a thing as two kings at once? And he has a discussion, but he writes here, V'shamati pa mipi mori v'chami. I heard from my father-in-law, Maran Agoin Rabbeinu Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal, Shenizdama pam bebeso shamori harav, mori v'rebi, Maran Agon, Rabbeinu Yosef Dov Soloveitchik Zatzal. Right? My father learned under Rav Soloveitchik, so he calls him his Rebbe. Ubiyom zeh lomad kifi min hago lilmod Tanach b'chol boker lachat tefillah shachris. And of course, Reb Yaakov always learned every morning right after shachris. He learned 2 kapitlach in Tanach, so he'd finish Tanach in 1 year. If you do 2 kapitlach a day, you finish in 1 year. And that I remember that was always Reb Yaakov's minhag to do that. So what was he learning after Tefillah Shach? Haperik Milchemes Hamolek, the Ketzad Hevir Shmuel Mishol et HaMelucha, and how Shmuel Hevir means to like get rid of, right? Mishol the Melucha, V'shatach Sheila Zu Lefanav, and Reb Yaakov spread in front of Rav Soloveitchik this in front of him this question. Bilashono b'Yiddish. He asked him b'Yiddish. Vi vert min ois melech. He said to Rav Soloveitchik, God, Shmuel said, Kara Hashem es mamlachta v'nasan l'rechato. So Rav Yaakov said to Rav Soloveitchik, Vi vert min ois melech. Keitzad ma'abdin et hatoar melech. How do you lose it? Right? How does that work? David becomes king and Shmuel loses it? How does that happen exactly? That's what he asked for Soloveitchik, for Yaakov is Soloveitchik. For Omar Lisha, grid hayama od sameach upanav tzahavo lemash Lazu. Soloveitchik was shining. He loved the question. Ve'rich l'taretz kushizu, and he gave an answer. Ulam chaval shalomasa litolchen dvarim. But my shver didn't tell me what he said. We never got a chance. Now, it doesn't mean that Reb Yaakov didn't hold from what he said or was hiding it. It means that something came up. I used to have this all the time with Reb Yaakov. I would ask Reb Yaakov a question, he'd start an answer, and then someone would come to see him. So I would never get, I have to always come back to, okay, Zadie, we got up to here. Now what else you have to say? Right? So that's probably, I'm thinking what happened is Reb Yaakov was telling him over the story that happened with him, Rav Soloveitchik, and then someone walked in. So he never got a chance to say it. And that's the way it was. And when my father finally wrote this article, Reb Yaakov was already gone. He was not in the world anymore. So my grandfather has a whole different lumdis on this, but this is what Reb Yaakov's lumdis is. Okay? Now I just want to tell you the reason why did I give you also the Radak here? I'll tell you why I gave you the Radak. But again, according to Reb Yaakov, the Rambam could never have used Shmuel as a case that Shmuel was afraid. Because Reb Yaakov was saying, this is Reb Yossi's answer. Reb Yossi's answer is, it doesn't mean he was afraid. It's not a rhetorical question. It doesn't mean he's afraid. He means he just wants to know how to do it. Right? Halachically, how do you do it? You do it for Hesi, you do B'tzina, right? So that's Reb Yossi's answer. My question, of course, is, why didn't Reb Yossi say it? Now, with Rashi and Tosfos, I don't say that, because why didn't Rashi say it? Because he's not alive anymore. But if they're both alive, so why didn't he say it? That's something I never really had a good answer to when Reb Yaakov said this chiddush, right? Now, the Radak also has an idea that Shmuel was not afraid. But you have to read the Radak well to see that. Okay, if you don't read it well, you won't notice it. Okay, the Radak starts off over here with a yesod. The reason why I want you to learn this Radak, because Rabbi Yaakov held that this type of Radak tells you about the whole sheet of the Radak, not only in Tanach, but in his life. Okay, I remember Reb Yaakov saying to me when I asked him, "What's the Radak's derech?" He said, "The Radak's derech is to show you pshat on the most basic level, and that's the way you have to live your life too. You have to live your life al pi pshat. You don't live it al pi remez sod. Today, everybody lives their life al pi remez and sod. You know, al pi the Zohar, al pi the Arizal, right? Everybody lives their life according to this new hashkafa. But the Radak didn't have that hashkafa. He had, I live my life al pi pshat. And you're going to see it in this Radak, and you'll see it in another 100 Radaks. Okay? But this is one of the Radaks. So we'll begin it. And then we won't finish, we'll begin it. Matzanu, Eglas Baka, page 5. Matzanu ki afal pi shahaya maftiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu hanavi o hatzadik. We find in Tanach that even though God assures a navi or a tzaddik, afal pi came hu nishma meleches makom sakana. He still is careful not to go b'makom sakana. He does his ishtadlus. K'mo sharinu b'Yaakov Avinu, sheftichu HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'avro aram na'arayim, v'amolo v'ashivos el adom azos. God says to him, you're going to go to Lavan, I'm going to bring you back to this land. V'sham gabke nira lo hamalach v'vticha, v'amar shuv el eretz avosecha ma'atcha v'yeimach. And the malach tells Yaakov when he's by Lavan, go back to Eretz Yisrael. I'll be with you. V'kasher shama ki Esav ba'al l'kroso v'yira Yaakov mo v'yetzalo. Right, and he's still afraid of Esav. So the way the Rambam understands it is, it's a chsaron in Yaakov. The Radak says, sorry, that's not a chsaron in Yaakov. Not a chsaron. You're supposed to, still al pi teva, you're supposed to be afraid. And you have to do something about it, even though God was maftiach. Okay? So this is what we call living al pi pshat. V'kasher shama ki Esav b'kol zo v'yira Yaakov ma'od v'yetzalo. V'chein David shahaya nimshach lemelech al pi Hashem haya borech mipnei Shaul. Right? David used to run away from Shaul all the time. Right? Why didn't David stand there and say, God was moshech me, Shmuel was moshech me, I don't have to run away? Right? Does David have weak midos that he had a pachat? V'gam God hanavi omalo lo seishu b'mitzudah. Even the Navi told him, don't stay here anymore. Leave, because Shaul's out to get you. V'chein b'divrei al milchamas hayu osen tachbulos achar avtachas hakelis bara. And when they made wars, they used to do tachbulot means to
tactical maneuvers,
tactical war tactics, right? Kamosha asa gidom bidvar kadim v'alipin. God told him, you're gonna win the war. V'gam pa'amim hayu osen hatachbulot b'mitzvah takel. Even sometimes God would tell them to do tachbulot. Kamosha kusu b'yoshua b'kiva shiricho hekef ha'teir. V'gam b'milchemes ha'ai simna l'cha orev. V'cheino ma David ubata lahem mimul b'chaim. David also said, we have to go by b'chaim, we have to make a tactical war plan. And therefore, God was commanded Shmuel to do a tactical plan, even though he went with God's mitzvah. So he says, I see from over here when Shmuel says to God, right, how shall I go? Right? Right? He doesn't mean he's afraid. He wants to know what tachpula he should take along. Okay, and that's what the Radak here says. This is the Radak everywhere. God does it al minhag ha'olam. V'kach al minhag ha'olam haya lo liYaakov liromi pnei Esav u'David pnei Shol v'lishmol pnei Shol v'Shmuel pnei Shol. Im haya Mosheach melech b'chayav, if he would be Mosheach David as melech b'chayav v'haya lo levakesh tachpula, right? He had to ask for a plan, a tactical plan. His shayla was not, I'm afraid. Means, what tactic should I use? Because if I don't use a tactic, Shaul will kill me. And that's true. Al pi teva, that should happen. So this is the Radak's approach to this whole idea. So again, even according to the Radak, you can answer up Reb Yossi. Because Reb Yossi could say, it doesn't mean he was afraid. It means he just wanted to know. Or if he was afraid, he had a right to be afraid. Right? He had a right to be afraid. But you could learn he wasn't afraid, or maybe you could say that Reb Yaakov's is better because according to the Radak, he was afraid, but he had a right to. So it wasn't such terrible like the Rambam, but he was afraid because he had a right to be afraid, like Yaakov and Esau. But according to Reb Yaakov, he wasn't afraid at all. He was just asking how he should do it. Right? That's all. He wasn't, according to Radak, he was afraid, but he had a right to. So you can't criticize Shmuel on it. But Reb Yaakov's even better because Bechlal wasn't afraid. Right? But this is the Radak. And Reb Yaakov always loved the Radaks because he learns everything according to straight logic, how it has to be. And there's no such thing anymore. God tells you, and now you have nothing to worry about. Which today, that's everybody. God told me, right? And now I have nothing to worry about. That's not true according to the Radak. You still have to do a shtadlis because everything's al pi minhag ha'olam, minhag ha'teva. Okay, we'll take this up already. I have one more thing I want to show you next week, and then we'll go on to something new.
Sure. Can you just speak for a minute or two about your father's book? I mean, what's the name of the book and what's the text?
Okay, so the name of the book is Minchas Yisrael, and my father, at the end of his life, put together many articles. He wrote Lumdisha articles, right? And he put it together and made a sefer from it. That's all he really did. And there's a lot of interesting topics. In fact, there's one topic, right, that he has, that a question he got from a Chappelle's guy. The Chappelle's guy, right, had a father who was Italian and the mother was Jewish. And of course, the Chappelle's guy married a nice Jewish girl, right? And they're living in Israel. And he comes to my father and he says to my father, I had a baby boy. My father wants to be the Sanda. Right? And my father's Italian. He's not Jewish. So my father has a tshuva in there. It's a very interesting tshuva. If we get a chance, I'll read it for you. Right? There's a tshuva on whether the father's allowed to be the Sanda or not. But he has a lot of interesting topics. He has some regular yeshivish topics, but there's a lot of interesting topics as well. And he has some of his drushes in there. And then he has book reviews he wrote for a journal, book reviews for some very famous Sforim, that he wrote book reviews, and he put those in there, like 10 book reviews he also put in there on different Sforim. But that's really what it's made up of. But he happens to have an article on this, and he quoted Rav Soloveitchik. He doesn't learn like Reb Yaakov. He didn't know this part of Reb Yaakov. This part of Reb Yaakov was only it was written by some Talmidim and it was on a recording. So my father does quote Reb Yaakov from the Ksav Yad, but Reb Yaakov took a different approach in the Ksav Yad than he did over here. Okay.
Can,
So
can you
stop
can
here.
you
Yeah.
can you scan for us your father's article about Melucha?
I could do better for you if you want. I could give you the book for free. I probably
I'd
have
love to have it.
100 of them.
I'd love to have it.
Oh yeah. So I
For
could give
sure.
you the book for free, no problem. When he
That's
passed away, it just sits there in a machzan in Efrat. That's all it's doing.
Give one to Ruthie, and she'll give it to me.
Okay, I'll get you the book. Anyone who wants it, I can give you away a book, no problem.
Shkoyach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shkoyach, thank you so much.
By the way,
Good.
today people don't want books even for free, so it's a chiddush. Okay, take care. Bye bye.